Hello world. For today's video, I'm here with my brother, William.
Hello.
He was my donor for the stem cells, and I decided it's a good idea to talk about a donor, what it was like, and the whole experience from his side. Most of you who follow me know my story. I will again put a link to the playlist for the whole leukemia story, and you can follow that there if you don't know about it yet. But for now, we're going to get William's side of the story from what he was doing. Now, originally, 2.5 years ago, when I was diagnosed, they wanted to find donors, and William was not allowed. And would you like to explain to them what the medical history was for that?
Okay, so 2.5 years ago, he was diagnosed with leukemia, and I think it was it 3 years ago, 3.5. I was in hospital because they suspected that I had Guillain-Barré, which is it's kind of an autoimmune system disease, which causes your white blood cells to go a bit finicky and they start attacking your nerves. So that means you get partially or entirely paralyzed for a bit. I got through that obviously, and I'm fine now. But because I had an autoimmune system disease, which played with my white blood cells, they were not allowed to check if my white blood cells were mixed with Gert's. That's because they were afraid that if they started playing with my white blood cells, they did not know what would happen. Because Guillain-Barré itself is a very
It's a very scarce disease.
yeah, it's a very scarce
Uncommon.
disease.
It's actually less common than leukemia.
Yeah. So the chance that two people get uncommon disease like we did is so small that we might actually be even one of the first to have this combination. So they had no idea what would happen if they started playing with my white blood cells.
Yeah, I believe they were talking about if they started to play with white blood cells, would he get Guillain-Barré again? The other one was what would my body do with it, because the whole thing with leukemia is you've got very incorrectly made white blood cells, and these white blood cells are very crucial, which is why they're very, very careful.
Yes, and the thing with Guillain-Barré as well is it's very dangerous because it affects all your nerves. So even the nerves that control your breathing, they can be affected. So they had to make the decision: are they going to take the chance that I get sick again, or that Gert gets Guillain-Barré on top of his leukemia, or are they going to what are they going to do? So they eventually decided it would be better if they did not test me. That kind of it hurt me a lot that I could not be tested, because I always had the idea, what if I am that match that you needed? So that was difficult for me to get to terms with after this whole thing. And I think at that moment it was a very painful decision that they decided not to test me.
Yeah.
For me at least.
Yeah, and at the same time, my sister, I think they came within 24 hours that my sister Dylan, she was not a match. They were just pretty simple, immediately done. And then when we looked in the World Donor Bank, there was no match. So we were sort of sitting with thingy. Where I suppose we got lucky, for the grace of God, we managed to get me stable on medication for a long time. And so that gave us a chance to get things for me and Tessa to do other things and that sort of thing, stable for a long time. Then of course leukemia came back. That's all in my playlist. And when it came back, one of the things Tessa did, I think she probably also had the gut feeling that this was the way it had to be done. She asked my doctor, she said, can't we get William tested anyway? Now what I noticed from the Amsterdam Zwolle discussion, because I went to the hospital here in Zwolle, and they work closely with the Amsterdam Medical University there. They said, you know what, let's just test William. If he's not a match, end of discussion. If he is, big discussion. So they approached you then?
Yeah, so they phoned me, think shortly after you gave me the heads up, and they asked if I wanted to come in to get my blood tested. I of course was incredibly happy about that because I could now finally see, I could finally get closure in, am I now a match or not? And in the first conversations with me, they told me, listen, we do not know what's going to happen to you. We don't know if you are going to be fine. We don't know if you're going to get Guillain-Barré again, or if you're going to get another autoimmune disease, or if Gert's going to get it. We don't know. So they were very clear from the get-go. We don't know what's happening. We're stepping into unknown territory at the moment. So they took my blood and they did the first tests to see if our white blood cells matched.
It's what they call the result came out that were what they call HLA identical. It means our DNA is not necessarily the same match. I mean, William's hair is lighter than mine, not that I have hair to show at the moment. He's got, I think, a bit more red in his beard than I do. We have certain things that are different genetically, but our white blood cells are the same type, the exact same type, 100% match, which is why they like to check family members, brothers and sisters, because it's your best chance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they found out we were identical in that aspect, and then they went over to the second part of the procedure, which is they go and check if you are physically capable of doing it. So if you do not have too many diseases, like they ask you if you have like AIDS, or if you have another sexually transmitted disease, or they ask if you've got hepatitis, or they go into a whole thing to see, are you suitable to give stem cells. In that they also again tell you, like, okay, this is what's going to happen in the procedure and how are things going to go, so they prepare you well for it. And then in my situation there was the extra thing that I had to go to a neurologist to go and see if they think that I still have a remnants of Guillain-Barré, if something remained there, or if I was safe to donate. And in that was just a short consult and a short conversation to see what does my body still does my body still show signs of that I had Guillain-Barré. So they test your nerves and they test to see if you don't maybe still have some impaired motor skills or all that. But well, that was all okay. They decided I do still show some signs of that I had a nerve problem, in that my feet aren't as sensitive as they used to be, or my fingers sometimes twitch and tingle. So that was, but that was all okay. They said that I was fine for 2 years at that point, so I can go and donate. So then, yeah.
So before we talk about the procedure of the donation, there was also something else that William mentioned to me that he felt was also playing a role and that's why I also mentioned we had these 2 years all of a sudden where I was stable, that we could sort of like wait. And that's up to you what you want to tell about it, because it's also got to do with your personal life.
Yes, so in those 2 years I was not in a good place. So I have been a Christian now for 4 years. I've been saved and born again. For the first 3 years we were also in a church that was not really healthy for us, and mentally scarring. So I was also not in a right place there. Coupled with that, I also had financial issues. So my life wasn't actually at a stable place, and I just started a new. I just went to school again to become a train mechanic, and my life was just in a bit of a lot of change, and it wasn't stable. It was going through all kinds of things, and I believe that when we first found out Gert had leukemia, I was not in a right situation, not in my walk with God, and not in my personal life to be able to go through that. because it was actually fairly it was fairly substantial in my case, and it was quite invasive. So in those 2 years, I believe God had to get me on my feet, get me to overcome my financial situation, and also get me ready to enter into what God had for me. And well, yeah, the things I saw in those 2 years were just incredible things that happened to me. I mean, the way I went from being an unresponsible child to being actually mostly an adult was was astonishing. And the incredible thing was when I was asked to donate was also the moment when I finished my schooling to become a mechanic. So a whole bunch of chapters closed at the moment, and this one opened, and and I really see God's hand in this whole situation, the way He worked all of it.
Yeah. Yeah, the whole timing was actually, it's amazing how, yeah, my stability in the leukemia, that it lasted long enough. And I mean, and the thing is, I do actually have an aggressive leukemia, which is amazing. It was so stable for so long. And that when it got out of hand again, at that point, William could be tested, schooling done, he was in a better place. I think he even started playing cricket again and getting more back into sports, starting working on his health. And all of that sort of stuff. So it really was amazing.
It was incredible. I started going to a church where I could develop my skills with God, for instance, as well at that same time. I think the month before I donated, I had my first sermon that I prepared and brought to people. It was at his brother-in-law and one of my best friends' wedding.
Yeah.
So I could do that. So it was just amazing to see how God worked all of these things. That he kind of, I think he saw that I was not ready to go through that, and therefore you were stable for just long enough for that to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Now, one of the things I really would like to have people do is to consider being a donor. And we're going to tell you William's experience of donorship, but before we do that, I just want to give a little caveat. What William experienced is the extreme. In theory, you will not experience this extreme if you go through it. But we are going to tell you William's experience because, and I think maybe it's got to do with the Green Beret history,
Yes.
maybe played a role in it and that sort of thing. But we're going to tell you about William's donorship. But to give you an idea, I first, when we originally planned to do this, we found that my leukemia got so aggressive that chemos couldn't keep it under control. We were a little worried that I wouldn't be able to get back into remission and stable enough for it. And all of a sudden, we just did an experiment. We said, let's try one of the meds again, higher dose, and miracle on miracle, I went into remission. And the minute we saw I was in remission, Testra said, okay, let's just plan it in straight away. Doctor was, yes, we're going to plan it in straight away. So we went, all of a sudden, in lightning, we just went and planned the stem cell transplant with the idea, let's hope Gert stays stable for 3 months, that it works. And so William was in I think you actually had your meds by then anyway, because we were supposed to do this in August. Explain how you got into this.
This was first of all very interesting because basically Gert's situation is like this. His life has already been leveled and totally destroyed by the leukemia, so he didn't really have much of a schedule or anything. No. But because I still work, the way they do this is when they test me, they also say, okay, you are a match. Do you still want to donate? Which is one of the funniest things I think you can ask a brother is, do you still want to save your brother's life or do you want to let him go? So they give you that power, but that's because you have to now, in your busy work schedule, also schedule all the appointments and all the stuff. So I always got a bit of the news before Gert did. So when we found out what the dates were to donate and the dates were to do the transplant, Gert hadn't been to his coordinator yet to get all that information. but I was just told that. So we would tell each other everything that we kind of got to know about the whole procedure. So I got my meds as soon as they found out I was a match and I could go. And these meds were injections. Now, I am frightfully afraid of needles because I used to have. I think we had the same thing. We got what's it, that spinal taps. Right?
Oh,
Yeah.
no, well, my injection fear I always had, and I will admit that I just got to a point where it's like I can handle needles, and then they screwed me up with the injection in the spine. Yes, William, I think you were okay. They just went for the spine and messed you up as well. Oh,
They kind of terrorize you with that.
yeah.
But so I was now kind of traumatized by needles, and he was totally traumatized. So I got all of these injections that I had to take, and I had to take 3 injections every morning for, I think it were 3 days build up, and then every day I had to donate. So I got the injections, and when I had to do my first injections, I was incredibly scared. I was absolutely terrified. I had the needle in my hand and I went for my stomach because you had to do it. It's almost like an insulin injection. It's similar to that in that you inject into the fat tissue under the skin. So I was going to go for the stomach and I just couldn't. I just froze. I couldn't do it. Both our parents are diabetic, so they can inject. So I asked them to help me, but I would not let them anywhere near me with a needle. I basically recoiled, moved out of the way every time a needle came close to me. So I phoned the doctor. I said, "Listen, this is not working. What are we going to do?" And eventually they said, "Well, Mr. Jonker, just try it one more time. This is the only thing we have for you." Okay, fine. I'm going to have to do something. And I had in the back of my mind all the time that my brother is actually going to die if I don't do this. You know?
Yeah, we should point out this was the Sunday, and that Monday I was going to get my first dose of radiation. And the trick was, if I did the radiation, if I didn't have stem cells after radiation, I was dead anyway. So
let alone that in the whole build up to this, you got into such a critical state that this donation was basically it was not even done on the day we planned because we had to do because he went into
they were worried.
Yeah.
They were worried that I was going out of remission again.
Yeah.
We actually did bone marrow biopsy. The day before I did the administration day at the hospital. That day before the Tuesday we went. I went to do the bone marrow. The Thursday we were at the doctor, and the doctor opened the results and said, "Thank goodness, you're still in remission." Friday we went and did the administration work, and Sunday I was then admitted in the hospital. And William had to start his injections on that Sunday.
I started mine. No,
Yeah.
I think I started mine on the Saturday.
Did you do it on Saturday?
I started mine on the Saturday because I had to have 3 mornings to build up. So okay, so that Saturday I put on some skillet and I just had it and just stuck it in, injected, and I did all 3 of them. And I called my parents and I said, "Okay, I think I just injected myself." To the point that my dad was also kind of shocked because he was the one trying to stick a needle in me all the time, and so that happened. They said in the beginning of this all, they said, "You're going to experience some slight discomfort and pain." They said, "We'll start you off on 2 paracetamols a day, or 2 paracetamols at a moment. It's like 6 a day or whatever. So you can be in relative comfort while you're taking the injections." So it's always going to hurt because what it does is it builds up your the stem cell levels in your bone marrow, and then at some stage it just pushes them out of your bone into your bloodstream. Now, Gert had that at some stage as well.
I did with the leukemia cells, yes. That it just
that with the leukemia cells.
bursts out. Yeah.
And that hurts. They said if it does get too painful, you can get a stronger painkiller. Now again, to point out, I'm a special situation.
Yes.
I was the first person to do it the way we did it, and I was in excruciating pain. I was in the worst pain I think I'd ever felt. And I have broken bones before. I have played rugby. I have played cricket. I work with hammers every day, so I hit myself regularly. So I know about pain, but man, this was terrible. And I was lying on bed and I just started screaming and shouting for I think about an hour. And that was when all the stem cells got
Loosed.
loose out of my bones and put into my bloodstream.
Yeah.
So my parents phoned the hospital and got a opioid for me to take. And I was basically zonked out for the next couple of days on a mild form of morphine that they gave me.
Yeah. Now, we must point out this is because of William's medical history. We think it made it worse. Normally, you will have some discomfort, but not always. It's not like you will be in pain. So, if you want to be a donor, you've got to, which we really would appreciate, you've got to remember that what that means is even if you have a little bit of discomfort for 2 or 3 days, you're saving someone's life who's could have their life ruined or whatever for a long time, who could end up dying. So that's why we need donors. And I think it's important also that if you do your William story, you do understand this is an extreme. This is not what usually happens.
Yes. I'd also say this is I went through all that and I felt all that pain, and after that the thought that came to my mind was, would I be able to have done this for someone who wasn't my brother? And the first thought that popped into my head was yes, I would. Because you must remember is you have a small moment of discomfort for somebody else that they can live an entire life. So in just a logical way of thinking, you have to do the math of it's a little bit versus an entire life.
Yeah.
So I got through the ordeal of the preparation, and to make it worse, this situation, which was already out of the ordinary, went even more out of the ordinary in that when I went to the hospital to give my stem cells.
Yeah, that was the Wednesday. That was my last day of radiation therapy. Let's just point out, when they do this, they do plan that you're probably busy for about 2 days giving
Yes.
stem cells, and they got like, maybe a third, and in some cases a fourth day in case necessary. But they plan usually about 2 days for taking stem cells.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when the day came that I had to donate, I went to hospital and they do a last check to see what is the average count of stem cells and what does it look like. They also check to see if you haven't contracted any bad disease in the meantime, and they do all that. Now normally they can take my blood very, very easily. It's normally just stick a needle in me and I drain out some blood quickly. But this morning they couldn't find a single vein in my arm. This was a bit of a problem because to take the stem cells, you normally get one line in one arm and one line in another arm. And what it does is they take the blood out of your one arm, they put it through a leukapheresis machine, and then it goes back into your other arm. So you don't lose any blood, it just takes the stem cells out in the leukapheresis machine, and then you get your blood back. So I kind of looked at that and thought, ooh, don't know if that's a problem for the procedure. But they eventually got some blood. I went off to the hematology department, and then they were going to now start the procedure of harvesting the stem cells. I must point out my mother never liked the idea of calling it harvesting. She said it kind of felt a bit impersonal when they talk about harvesting your child's bodily fluids. But I go to the room where they're now going to do this, and they point me to a bed. So I'm getting ready for them to stick some needles in my arms. I'm okay with that, it's no problem. And I think they had 3 nurses, and a doctor try to put the lines in my arms. And not a single one could find a vein. Nobody. So here I am thinking, oh crap, so what are they going to do? And then I remember the second option they have, plan B, is they go in with a line in the groin. But they have to do that under mild sedation, and they have to basically So they give you an injection that you don't feel the pain in the
local
area.
anesthesia.
Yes. So I was not looking forward to that, and they well, I won't go into much detail, but they eventually get the line in my groin, and well, basically 2 lines, one in, one out, and they start the procedure. At this point, I'm a bit annoyed because they've already struggled to take the blood in my arm, and then they couldn't find a vein to do the procedures like it was supposed to be done. And now they have to also put a line in my groin, which is fairly uncomfortable. And we start going, and they say, okay, it's going to take all day, it's going to take about 6 hours to do this. Already not feeling comfortable about that. And meanwhile, like an hour later, someone comes and says, we checked your blood and it looks okay, you should have enough stem cells. Now what they are looking for is that you can donate 4 million. That's the minimum. If you donate 4 million, you can go home. So I'm hoping that they get 4 million and I can just leave. Gert quietly is hoping that I have to stay a night because then he's got someone to hang out with. So I sit there patiently waiting, talking to my parents, having fun with them, and man, this day took long. It took incredibly long.
Until I had my radiation therapies. It took Mom to the first one in the morning and Dad to the afternoon they could see what happens.
Jeez.
Yeah.
But in any case, so eventually they took all the stem cells and they went to count. Now, what they do is they leave the line in your groin, because if you have to come back the next day, well, you don't go home actually if you have a line in your groin. You have to stay a night in hospital. You have the lines in your arms, you can go home and have a nice night's sleep at home. So I was not looking forward to staying a night in hospital with a line in my groin which prevented me from moving around in bed, which meant I had to stay an entire... I already lay in the same position for I think 8 hours at this point. 6 hours of the procedure, the 1 hour it took for them to get the thing in there, and then the hour that I was waiting after the procedure. And they came with the news. So instead of donating 4 million, I donated 18.5 million.
Which they said is the most they've ever gathered in one sitting.
So another thing to remember, they expect only that you produce 4 million stem cells. I produced 18 million. That means 18 million stem cells got pushed out of my bones at roughly the same time.
That's the heavy pain.
That was why I was in so much pain. So in a normal procedure, you would not be in that much pain because you're not producing that much stem cells. So that's why when we say you must not listen too much to my story to make up your mind, because I am an extremely rare occasion. I am the... They never expect a donation to go like mine did. Never.
Yeah.
It's such a weird thing that it actually happened. Like that.
So normally you'll have the build up. You will go through the checks. They will make sure you're healthy. If you're not healthy, they won't let you do it. So you don't have to worry about that. And then you'll usually do the build up. There'll be a little bit of discomfort. You'll usually have 1 or 2 days that they'll do it. It's usually through the arm. And they're happy when you get 4 million. I think they prefer it if you can get closer to the 8, but you need at least 4.
Yes.
And then you're done. I believe you also will only ever be asked to donate twice in your life if you're asked. I mean, the chances that you're a match is pretty low anyway. But yeah, it's a very doable procedure. I know my wife Tessri is written into what's called matches. It's the Dutch donor bank. I will put a link to matches in the description of this video. I will also put, if I can find one, link to the World Donor Bank. Slight camera issues, but we're back. Anyway, thanks for taking time to explain this all with us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Like I said, I'm going to put the links in the description and do register. Thank you for listening. There will be also a link to my playlist for the leukemia. And keep well and God bless.
God bless.